Hey guys, what is up? This is Matthew Davis, me once again. Welcome back to another movie review, aka After I Saw It. This time it is going to be on The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Now this movie is set 183 years before the events of the original trilogy by Peter Jackson. This movie tells the fate of the House of the Helm Hammerhold, the legendary king of Rohan, a sudden attack by Wulf, a clever and ruthless Dunlending lord seeking vengeance for the death of his father, forces Helm and his people to make a daring last stand in the ancient stronghold of the Hornburg, a mighty fortress that will later come to be known as Helm's Deep. Finding herself in an increasingly desperate situation, Era, the daughter of Helm, must summon the will to lead the residents against a deadly enemy intent on their total destruction. And this is a 2-hour-long animated Lord of the Rings film. I'm not fully familiar with the Tolkien lore other than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I figured when it comes to the Lord of the Rings, I feel like that's the thing that most people are going to be familiar with the most. I've also seen the Hobbit movies. I also played that god-awful Gollum game that I wish I could forget. Oh, and Shadow of Mordor. This was good. This was really good. But when I heard an animated Lord of the Rings movie, which is actually an anime, I thought, yeah, that could be a blast. That could be like, a big thing. The fact that they're taking the Lord of the Rings and making it an anime movie. I was all like, oh, this could be big. Unfortunately, it only made number 5 at the box office. Even movies like Craven beat it out. And it's not really doing very well with critics either. I mean, it's mostly been a mixed reception, but I can tell you right off the bat that this is not a bad movie. There are elements to the film that I think work really well. Not all the time, but I do think that the movie, for the most part, is pretty decent. I think that kind of gives away my rating, but, I feel like, this is a film that I feel like critics are being a bit too harsh with. Now, granted, right off the bat, I don't think that the animation is perfect. There are often times where I think the animation looks really good, but there are often times where sometimes it can feel a little too cheap. Like, sometimes when it comes to characters, they can act a little bit stiff, even when it comes to specific parts of the battles. But the battle sequences, a lot of them are really cool. It is PG-13, and there are often times where the fight sequences can be a little bit violent. There is, like, this disturbing scene involving a corpse that I thought, for PG-13, but, it's animated, so they can get away with a little bit more when it comes to violence. And the main lead, Era, is, she's a likable enough protagonist, but, it does have characters that are very cliched to other fantasy adventures, including Lord of the Rings, because, they're very basic. They're pretty much what you expect. You got the powerful people, you got the, determined people, and of course the baddie and all that. But, when it comes to the storyline, it is something that I feel like is very basic and something that, I feel like all of us kind of get. They're trying to take their freedom back, but there's also a plot line early on in the movie where, Era is forced into marriage, but of course she doesn't want that. But yeah, I feel like the characters in the storyline, they're very basic, and it's kind of something that I wish they could have done more justice to in order to make it feel, fully epic. But that's not to say that it isn't, because oftentimes when it does come to the action, there are some sequences I thought were pretty cool, but of course, when it comes to the build-up and all that, it's pretty much something that I kind of expected. And, but I think when the way the movie gets set up, I feel like it gives you exactly what you would come to expect, given that the movie is 2 hours long. But, if you came for something, a lot more like what you're used to when it comes to the lore, because, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, they're based off the books, the whole Tolkien lore, there's multiple different timelines to this entire thing. But of course, for someone who's more familiar with the Peter Jackson trilogy, it's some people might compare it to that. But especially since Peter Jackson is involved with this movie. But even though he is involved with it, the director of this movie is what's his name? Kenji Kamiyama. Yeah, that's what his name is. And you do have a pretty decent amount of voice actors. You got Brian Cox, who was really good in the movie as Helmhammer, who I thought was easily the best character out of the entire movie when it comes to the characters. I mean, like I said before, Era is a likable protagonist, but a lot of the times the characters are very cliched and very basic. Same with the storyline, too. I don't really feel like, as a Lord of the Rings movie, it's particularly, unwatchable. There are times where, I do feel like, despite the animation being uneven, it does have some really cool battles. And despite the fact that I think the story is okay and the characters are okay, despite having a couple of really strong characters, I feel like, as a Lord of the Rings movie, in terms of the entire, Lord of the Rings lore, it's something that I'm not really gonna, judge because, or, really give my thoughts on because, again, I'm not fully familiar with it other than the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's just, I feel like it could have done so much more justice, and sometimes I feel like the movie, it can be a little too fast. Like, sometimes it doesn't get fully deep into specific parts of the movie. I feel like the movie is just trying to make its point out, a little too quickly, but I feel like it could have just taken its time a little bit more. I mean, sure, it would have probably made the movie longer, and the movie's long enough as it is, but I just feel like there could have just been more to it. As an anime Lord of the Rings movie, it's decent enough. It's definitely not horrible by any means. I just feel like it is a little bit disappointing, but hey. Oftentimes the animation can look nice, but oftentimes it can't. Characters, they're decent, but very cliched, but it does have a strong lead role, and I think Hammerhead is by far a very strong character, and by far the best character out of the entire movie, but in the end, Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, it's fine. I feel like the director could have done far more justice to this movie, making it feel like a truly epic fantasy adventure, different from, other entries and all that. But when it comes to the whole lore of Lord of the Rings, I'm not familiar with it. There have been audience members that have been very pleased with the movie, so that's good to know that it's not getting panned by everybody. I just feel like, as an anime Lord of the Rings movie and as a fan of both Lord of the Rings and anime, I feel like, combining these two things together could have been done so much better. Maybe within, I don't know, an animated series. Maybe I don't know, like the Castlevania Netflix series, because that adaptation of the beloved video games was very good. But I shouldn't really compare it to that. I just feel like, anime and Lord of the Rings can work. It's a little bit mixed here. But other than that, it's not a bad movie, but I can definitely see why it's not doing so well financially or critically, but I recommend giving it a one-time watch. It's passable, but hey, if I was to recommend this movie the last weekend, I would definitely recommend it over Craven. I'm surprised the director didn't do this more justice, because I feel like it could have worked so much better had it, had the animation been worked on a little bit more, because the budget wasn't super huge. I mean, it was decent enough. As far as I know, it was like $30 million to make, but yeah, it didn't even make like a quarter of that back. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe in the future it might be recognized a bit more. It might gain a massive cult following, because I could see that potential. But as it stands right now, it's a fine watch. Just don't expect anything super big, because you might get your expectations up a little bit too high. I kind of got them a little too high. I don't know, by the end of it, I was just like, yeah, that was decent, but yeah, it could have been so much more. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and yes, I will be seeing Mufasa the Lion King and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I'm probably going to be a little bit late on Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I'm going to see Mufasa the Lion King first, but hey, I'm obviously going to see those movies. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Word out.